has nothing. This is
Yes.
YouTube. YouTube. Zoom. Let's see where you drop down. You should see this little thing to pick. It's not even an option. I mean, I suppose I could turn the whole laptop.
Construction meeting. It's 9 o'clock. You won't have a heart attack if they can't find us.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Morning.
Morning.
Where's you looking to sit, Mr. Brown?
You can sit anywhere there.
Should I restart?
That's the only thing I can think of. It's not seeing the camera.
Right.
Restart and see what happens. Well, we're connected. The camera doesn't work for some reason.
I'm always ready with it. Get a quick comment. Idea.
Hey,
Ventilation is a little tough down here. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
the other day, Patty came and fixed something. on the switch.
So. Is anybody coming in on Zoom?
Laura Oswald, Dana Hogan, Craig Leggett, James Griffith, Bruno, Matt Simpson, Mark Weatherhill, and then 2 phone numbers.
See, last time I chose the Zoom, and pretty much everybody was here. This week I chose to come down here, and nobody all got here.
Well, it's nice.
Hello, this is Eric Millard with CS Energy. Can you guys hear me?
Downside of showing up. That and pants.
Leave it to Karen to pick up on that. That's good.
What are you looking for? Do you want the meeting ID?
Yeah, let me get the Zoom first, please.
Mm-hmm. Woo, that worked. Got it. Yay.
Better start setting up an hour ahead of time. All these technical
Jeez,
difficulties.
I know. It's supposed to get easier as time goes on. This out as far as I can. Okay, so we have you, Biddle, Craig. We don't have a quorum.
Yeah, me, Biddle, Craig, we got a quorum.
Aren't there? Oh, there's 5 people. Okay.
Yeah.
Am I starting?
Yeah, please. Brian's gonna join. He was just getting home from the barn, so he'll be here.
Start my recorder.
From the barn.
Doing chores.
I got a new system, so we're gonna get a lot of feedback. Oh, okay. Good morning, all. I'll be on it because I'm on Zoom, so you don't need to point the camera towards me.
Too late.
Okay. All right, let's call the meeting to order. First order of business is on my
Attendance.
attendance, please.
Okay. Craig Leggett.
Here.
Greg, you here?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, he's muted.
You're muted.
No, I shouldn't be muted. Let me see.
I can hear you, Craig.
Hear you,
This is
Craig.
Eric Millard.
I can hear you fine, Craig.
Michael Biddle.
Okay.
Here.
And Brian Campbell is not here. Mike Wild.
Hold on, we're not picking up the sound. Can you turn your sound up?
Do you know how?
We'll turn mine up.
Oh, here it is. Speakers. Okay.
Hey, Craig,
Yeah.
you got it over there? Okay, I'll turn mine off then.
Okay, so we have Craig Leggett, Michael Biddle, and Dave O'Brien.
And I just saw Brian Campbell join. There he is.
Okay, and Brian Campbell.
I'm here.
Okay, great. So, old business. Potential project updates. Nolan Propane is sent a letter which I'm going to change the order of business a little bit, but we'll go into that. Excuse me. They've got a letter. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the meeting. Let's move the agenda around. We do have the delineation. As long as Tom Jarrett's here, we got the delineation. As I said, they came back with a counter proposal to do all the. Did I pick up again? Do all the properties for $3,000. I'm off.
I'm muted.
I'm not on.
Hello? Hello? Come through her, yeah. Okay. You should turn your, no, if we turn hers off, you won't be able to hear that. Let me have you. Let's get this as far away as we can.
You got two microphones going. Somebody needs to turn one mic off.
Okay, does that do it? Pretty much. For $3,000.
Dave, you got two microphones going. You got to turn one mic off.
That's not gonna help. Does this work?
That's YouTube. This is.
Well, this is a new microphone.
Okay.
That's your new microphone, so we can do that.
Let me.
This should be in here, shouldn't it? The mic should be in here, because you might not get the Zoom.
Sorry, Tom, I didn't realize it was you. Mike,
Oh, my goodness, I was asking. How are you?
I'm good.
That's how I did recognize
Microphone.
him from with the.
We gotta write our names on the mask is what we gotta do.
Does that work?
No, that's fine.
Oh, yeah, this is like a Disney ride.
Okay, can you hear? Mike, would you say something, please?
Good morning.
Not you, Mike, the other Mike, Biddle?
Hey, good morning. Can you hear me?
Oh,
I can hear you now. We're getting feedback somewhere in
Hear
here.
you.
You know how to turn the mics
Did
off
you
on
show
this one?
YouTube that?
I think Brian did something new to his hair. Craig, check out Brian's hair.
I like how it goes off to the side there. Yeah.
That help?
With the little flowers in it.
Brian, turn around.
Does that help?
No?
hey, Dave, you're gonna have other people talk, so we can just put up with it and move the meeting along. Just let the other people on when they need to talk, and you'll just be annoying when we go back to you, and we're used to it, so we're good.
Wait, that's never different than normal.
Okay, so what we talked about was the fact that we have the, I'm sure my mic's off. Let me check.
Does she have two mics on? Ellie, you have two mics on?
I'm muted on Zoom, but there's that mic there.
Yeah,
It's unplugged.
I'm kind of getting used to it, really.
that's better.
You know, that echo when you disappear into your background, it all seems a little surreal.
Right in the same port it was.
There. Sounding good.
Hey, Craig.
Yeah, Michael.
Okay, all right, so Dave's on mute, right?
Yes.
All right, I just want to make sure if I lost everything or not out here in the hinterlands.
No. But Allie is not on mute. Allie, say something. Can't hear her.
No.
She's pretending. She's pretending.
All right, does this work?
Oh, there we go. I heard that
Okay.
part.
We
Okay.
have an echo. I don't know what's going on here, but we'll have to live with it. So delineation. Kara says we can authorize
I
the
think you can authorize it.
delineation change here. So I need a motion from one of the board members. I sent the contract out to authorize doing the delineation. So would someone make that motion, please?
I'll make
Michael
the
Biddle.
motion. Craig
Mike
Leggett,
makes the motion,
second.
second by Greg, was that you?
Yes.
Roll call on that, please.
So, and hold on. So just for the record, this is doing all the lots.
Yes,
Yep. And this is actually for a price that's less than what had come in previously.
correct.
Thank you. Aye, yes.
Okay,
Michael Biddle,
Yes.
Brian Campbell,
Yes.
Dave O'Brien.
yes. Okay. Next order of business, the executive park meeting. Anything else from the park? Jack, we're going to talk about the contract changes later. Okay. We have, I'm going to try and move away from her microphone.
Down the other end.
If they do, they can't hear me, which is a good thing, probably.
You're sounding good now.
How's this?
That sounds a lot better.
Okay. Hopefully it works. Okay, Mike Dowd is here from representing some solar companies. He had a presentation to give. And could you share, Ally, can you share the screen with him? Oh, no, you're not on Zoom, are you?
I'm not.
Okay, if you could share the screen with me, Ally, I'll have the presentation up.
Whoops. You want me to share it? Can you guys share it?
Does she have? I think she has to let me share the screen. Okay. Can people see the share now? Can you see the presentation now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Mike, now we got that fixed. Go ahead.
Good morning, Mike Dowd from Matrix Development. They've asked me to give a short presentation on the numbers. A lot of discussion about the assessment of solar facilities. We've had a lot of questions, and there's a lot of nuances to that. Wow, terrible echo. Should I move away farther from the mic? Is it better if I walk away?
Might or might not work.
No. Sorry, folks. Looks like you're going to hear me twice. So Dave asked me to put a presentation together to kind of review the numbers, and there's a lot of nuances to assessing solar facilities. I threw out some numbers at the last presentation, and we have a presentation here to kind of walk you through how we got to our numbers sorry. So we're going to walk through the numbers. We'll talk about, we're going to talk about assessment methodologies. We're going to talk about individual project economics. We'll look at full assessment versus a 25-year pilot side by side. We can look at the different payment options, pilots, community host agreements, for all that. I also want to talk about mitigating each town's Article 7 litigation options. Pilots will help you do that. And then I also threw in there, I wanted to look at a pilot versus some of the other pilots that you've done as an IDA. I don't have all the details, but I pulled some details from the website, and I'm comparing the Market 32 pilot you did with or tax exemption with the solar pilot, just to put things in some perspective. So just kind of a repeat of some of the stuff we've gone through in the last presentation. I represent, there are essentially 6 solar developers that are looking to work with the Washington Warren County IDA. We represent about 115 megawatts of solar. That's AC. And that will generate roughly $15 million in local lease income to the Washington. Not used to not having the echo there.
You did it.
Oh, that's great. Can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Good.
Yep, we got a yes. Good. Thank you. So 115 megawatts will generate roughly $15 million in lease income over the next 15 years to local Washington County residents. We'll generate roughly $14 million in pilot and property tax revenue. It'll generate about 570 construction jobs, of which we would like to work with the IDA in developing a workforce development program to ensure those jobs help new job creation in Washington County and ensure the jobs are coming from Washington County companies. Additionally, on the community solar side of things, we'll generate about $13 million in savings for local residents within Washington and Warren counties. It will go beyond that, but I'd like to put a program together to specifically try to keep those savings local within Washington and Warren County. But it has significant utility savings for the residents of these 2 counties. And ultimately, it's a $70 million community benefit program. There's a fair amount of money here.
Did you get online banking on your computer?
We're here today to work with the IDA and figure out how to use that money to best benefit Washington and Warren County. We're very open to different structures. We want to get to the numbers and get some agreement, and ultimately we'd like to do a pilot with you. We also think pilot is in your best benefit, and I'll show you why today in doing some of the comparisons that we created here. Again, just a kind of at a glance of who we are at a glance, the projects that we're talking about. There's 7 projects on. There are 6 solar companies. I think there are 9 projects in total. Each of them you can see here on this next slide. It's slide 4. You can see the size of the project, the proposed pilot payments. You got the special district and underlying land tax payments, and special district taxes over 25 years. The column you want to look at, we just wanted to provide some clarity on where the numbers are coming from and what projects. So at the end of the day, I mentioned there's roughly $14 million in property tax revenue. This slide here kind of gets you to those numbers. It associates the tax payments with the project itself. So we just want to give you some clarity where the money's coming from, which projects. Slide 5. So ultimately, what we're trying to get to is some agreement on the assessment methodologies. In solar, assessing assets it's not a new science. It's been around for a long time. Cell towers, equipment buildings, telecommunication, homes, businesses. It's a pretty detailed industry that is well known. The question always comes up with solar. Solar is a very expensive asset, but it has low revenue. It generates low revenue, and therefore it kind of skews some of the assessment methodologies. And so I put up 5 different options here, so we could look at all these options and how you'd assess solar and kind of the nuances of each of those options. There's nothing new here. Really, what this will come down to is the assumptions that you're making within the assessments, and we can explore that a little bit as we go through here. But so out of these 5 options, third-party assessment, I have that at the top. So if you take us out of it, you go to a third party and get an assessment, they'll come up with one number. CS Energy, who has Darby Solar, they did a assessment for that project, and they have a third-party assessment. I think CS would be willing to share that to you. We'll share those numbers later in the slide. Discounted cash flow, that's a pretty standard assessment option. Basically, you're taking the net operating income and discounting it to present value. Construction costs is another option. That seems to be pretty prevalent within Washington County, certainly within the town of Kingsbury, where my project's located. That's a method that that assessor would like to use. You also have pilot comparisons. So we reached out to the IDAs throughout the state where we have pilots, either our pilots or other pilots, and we've put together kind of an electronic database. And we'll send a link out at some point so you can review all that. But we have policies from IDAs, and we have pilots, actual living pilots with other IDAs. So we can get you a database of all that. The one thing I'll warn you is there are a lot of nuances in that, and they cover everything. So we're glad to kind of give you that material, but you got to keep in perspective that every solar project is unique in some way. Whether it was an incentive that was 3 years old or the cost that took place three years ago, everything changes. It continues to evolve. So it's not a apples to apples comparison. Every pilot's not going to be an apples to apples comparison, but at least you'll have a framework for what other IDAs are doing throughout this, both from a policy perspective and from a pilot perspective. We also have host community agreements in that electronic database, so you'll be able to look at those as well. And then lastly, I'll reference a NYSERDA pilot toolkit. Many people will discount the NYSERDA pilot toolkit, but it is a reference, and it in the mix of all the other assessment options should be considered. They've spent a fair amount of work working through all kinds of different agencies within New York State to come up with this toolkit, and I will reference it. And there's some, I think, excerpts out of the toolkit that will be beneficial to hear and talk about it and explore together. So, it is not. This is a toolkit that's been developed over the last 3 years. Yeah. So slide 6, assessment details. I kind of talked through these a little bit. You can read this. Third-party assessment. Like as I mentioned, CS Energy has hired a third party to assess one of their solar arrays. It's independent and becomes kind of a defensible assessed value because these are so-called third-party experts. Discounted cash flow, that's pretty straightforward. 25-year net operating income, that's discounted to present value to come up with your assessed value. Construction cost, keep in mind, my particular array is roughly about, it'll cost roughly $7.8 million to build. It's very expensive, but it's only going to generate kind of 2 times that income. It's not, it does not generate a ton of income.
To page 6 by any chance? The screen hasn't changed to page 6. There we go. Thank you.
But the first cost, the construction cost, is very high, which is why NYSERDA has to incentivize construction of these facilities, because the revenue will just not support building these facilities, and that's where the NYSERDA incentive comes into. Also, construction costs vary greatly. My construction cost for a 5-megawatt array is very different than CS's construction cost for a 20-megawatt array. So there's a fair amount of variability between our construction costs. And then lastly, the pilot consideration or comparisons. As I mentioned, we're putting together a database. You'll be able to look at those, give you some, put your hands on some actual pilots. And I kind of mentioned all this. The past pilots aren't indicative of today's economics. The incentives, the utility rates, this this field is always changing. And we, as developers, we're always trying to keep up and try to figure out how to make the economics work. NYSERDA's, keep in mind, NYSERDA's incentive is declining. It's been declining for years. The intent of NYSERDA's incentive is to give you enough money to make these things buildable, to construct them. And that construction costs, permitting costs, engineering costs are all going to come down over time because of economies of scale, and the learning curve is fairly steep. And so yesterday's economics don't essentially match today's economics, is what I'm getting at. And the pilots that have done in the past aren't necessarily one for one, apples to apples for what we're looking at today, but it'll give you a reference. Moving on to slide 7. I mentioned the NYSERDA pilot toolkit, and just you stop me if you have questions. I'm kind of going through these first slides quickly because I want to get to the numbers, which I think everybody will have their questions. But so the NYSERDA pilot toolkit, I took excerpts from the manual. I think it's important to kind of go through these. It's very relevant. They're exactly what I've been talking about. I'll read the first bullet here. Information is difficult to obtain by consulting in other communities because few communities have completed large-scale solar projects in operation. We're in 2020. I started developing community solar projects in 2017. In fact, the laws weren't completely flushed out until roughly mid-2018. So we essentially, the first few systems are going to be built in 2018. They've only been operating for maybe a year. They're still trying to get subscribers. There isn't a lot of history to draw from. So from an assessment perspective, to go out and say, we can find 20 systems been operating for the last 10 years and use that as a benchmark, that doesn't exist. You're looking at a benchmark of maybe 6 months to 2 years tops. And it's going to be tough to find a system that's been operating for 2 years fully subscribed, at least from the community solar system side. And then from the large-scale NYSO projects, most of those projects are just beginning to get built today. And so that doesn't really exist in New York State either. So it's hard to find benchmarks from other solar systems to compare to today's solar systems that we plan on building end of this year or early next year. Bullet number 2, the pilot amount a project can afford depends on many factors, including construction, maintenance costs, and the amount of revenue from electricity sales. We're going to share that information for you. We're going to share that information with you. It's going to be different for every system. There's going to be a little variability, but from a revenue perspective, we know our revenue pretty clearly at day one. There's not a lot of upside. We're not going to be able to just mark up our revenue and because our taxes went up and charge more. That's not the way this system works. So our pilot amount has to be based on these semi-fixed revenues for the next 20 years. We do have an escalator. We can talk about that, but the revenue streams are pretty constant. And we finance the system based on what we know today. Bullet number 3, and we've said this before, from a solar developer's perspective, if the pilot amount is too high, or we think, or the assessment is too high, which is why we're asking to reach a common assessment here. If it's too high, we can't get these things financed. We can't build them. We can't put them in. And so it's a very binary discussion. If we don't know what the assessment is, we have to figure the assessment is worst case. And worst case is not gonna make these economics work. And I'll show you a slide in the back to compare worst case with the pilot amounts that we're proposing.
In reference to this here,
Yep.
If you do not receive a pilot, will these projects occur?
It's highly unlikely if we don't have a pilot that these projects will occur.
So the but if for a pilot, it won't occur.
It won't occur. $70 million of revenue is not coming to Washington County. We're hopeful though that we can all put our minds together and come to a common assessment and create a pilot that works for everybody. Workforce development program, community host agreements. We have a lot of money here to help Washington Warren County, the IDA, future projects, and we really like to put our heads together and figure out a solution, which is why we're here today. And then the last bullet, I'll just mention this quick. NYSERDA has created an incentive program based on the fact that taxes are going to be somewhere between 1% and 3%. We've created our spreadsheets based on a 2% of revenues taxing scenario. So we'll show you that later, but that's their recommendation, and that's where they factor that into their pro formas and how they figure out what incentive we need to build these systems. Any questions on that slide? Any more questions on this slide? Okay. Slide 8, assessment considerations. So I just want to note a couple of things about the assessments, how we view them anyways, and kind of where our position lies on real property law. So the first thing I want to mention is the real property law. It's subdivision 12, section 102, paragraph F. Paragraph F talks about, it defines real property, and it talks about movable machinery. And I literally copied this out of the law itself, and you can read it here. I'll read it out loud quickly. But shall not include movable machinery or equipment consisting of structures or erections to the operation of which machinery is essential, owned by a corporation, taxable under Article 9A of the tax law, used for trade or manufacture, and not essential for the support of a building, structure, or superstructure, and removable without material injury thereto. So much of the solar array is considered personal property, and it's based on this section of the real property tax code. We consider inverters, solar panels, solar panels and racking as real property. And the basis for that is this section. This section is referenced in the Cornell case. This section has been referenced by the third-party independent assessors. It's referenced often, but that is the basis for our belief that inverters, panels, and racking are considered personal property.
So Mike, I understand the Cornell law, there are third-party assessors who discount that as not being applicable here.
Yep.
I also understand there's another court case going on that they'd hope to have a decision in July on that may alter this.
Yep.
Any different, so you're using Cornell, another court case may change that.
There have been court cases for the last 20 years about this specific case or this specific law. Telecommunications industry has gone through this. Cogeneration facilities, like it's not just specific to solar. Cornell has referenced it. They may uphold it. They may shoot it down. If you don't include personal property in the assessment, you come to a full assessment, and I'll show you these numbers later. None of this works. You can't, a full assessment, if you do a construction cost, if you assess me at $7.8 million for our facility at $23 per thousand, there's not enough revenue in the stream to actually pay for taxes. And it doesn't, on top of that, there's no revenue for profit. So they absolutely won't get built if that's the case.
But the crux of this really, revolves around the assessment.
The assessment.
And you may have 17 different assessors in Washington County come up with different assessment models.
Which is the value of doing a community-wide pilot. Mm-hmm. So if you have a pilot set out by the IDA, you can come to a common assessment for solar facilities, create that framework so that you don't have all this confusion at the assessment level or at the assessor's town assessment level. And it eliminates all that, mitigates all that Article 7 stuff that can come afterwards. It's really being proactive about how to address this as a whole.
So these other IDAs that have already established a pilot, they don't base that on assessment, but based upon some other item like total amount of gigawatts produced, et cetera, or does it vary?
Every IDA does something a little different. Some IDAs accept NYSERDA's guidance. Some IDAs hire third-party assessors. There's generally some kind of pro forma that you work through with an IDA, doing discounted cash flow or construction assessment. There's some type of assessment that you go through, and generally it's a negotiation process, because there are many assumptions that are determined in that process or flushed out in that process where you have to come to an agreement to reach that assessment.
What if these legal cases that Dave was talking about go against you? Now what happens?
Well, ultimately it comes down to the assessment. If we can't reach a common assessment or a pilot or a host community agreement, a full assessment, there's not enough revenue in the model to be able to.
I understand that. I can see that. But what happens if that happens? It strikes me. Let's go back to something you said on a previous page.
Sure.
There's not a lot of history to draw from with quotation.
Yep.
And we have legal cases pending.
Yep.
There's so much Ouija board here that we have to go ahead and say, here it is, go do it.
Yep.
With nothing. That scares me to death.
So Mike Biddle has a question.
Go ahead, Mike.
Chairman, can you hear me?
I can hear.
Thank you for coming today. Really appreciate this outline. One of the things I'd like to get my arms wrapped around, and you mentioned it, and I'm going to call them subsidies, you're referring to NYSERDA and so on. Do the taxpayer subsidies, because essentially that's where NYSERDA money comes from, right?
NYSERDA's money comes from a utility charge, actually. It's a surcharge on your utility bill.
Okay. All right. So we pay it though. What I'm trying Yeah. What I'm trying to figure out is, you're saying if there aren't enough, the pilot, the subsidies, all of that, if there aren't enough of that compiled to come in, the numbers don't work for you. And I understand that. I appreciate that. What I'm trying to figure out is, you're outlining a host benefit package, right? Does that equal to, or is it greater than the amount of subsidies that are coming in to support this program? Through NYSERDA, through other pieces, through the pilot program, through all of that. I'm just trying to get a balance here. Does that make sense?
It does. So the benefit to the host community, it far outweighs the incentive that we're getting from NYSERDA, but by quite a bit. NYSERDA is it's a small part of the overall picture here. And actually, I think I have some numbers in the back. My backup numbers will give it to you. I'll show you exactly what we're getting from NYSERDA. You're talking about $13 million in savings, community solar savings. You're talking about $15 million in lease income. The solar incentives are a fraction of that, probably about I don't know, 10% of that. It's pretty small.
Okay, if we get to the point, if maybe you have the complete, you were saying you have parts of it here in this presentation. I just want to make sure we're doing a full comparison of dog in, sausage out. What are we, NYSERDA taxpayers, everything, putting in, and what are we getting back?
Like one way to look at this, you're going to pay this, it's called a systems benefit charge. The NYSERDA money comes from a system benefit charge, comes out of your utility bill every month. You're going to be charged that until the day you die. regardless of whether you get solar. If you don't get solar, you'll get nothing from that charge. You're going to pay that anyways. And that money is used for installation projects, energy projects. It's used for workforce grants. It's used for a number of great things. You're going to pay that SBC charge whether you get solar or not. If you get solar, then you'll actually have benefit from that money. If you don't do solar, you're going to have no benefit from that money.
So, no, thanks for explaining that. My thing though is it's those type of charges that make New York the worst place and the highest energy costs in the country. So whether we use it or not, that's the stuff that's driving my business clients crazy. I think Mr. Griffith could appreciate that and so on. So I just want us looking at the whole thing. I'm really glad we're having this conversation. Thank you for letting me ask the question.
It's worth noting that on a kilowatt hour out of a 15-cent charge that you're getting from your business, total cost, the SBC charge is hundredths of a cent. It's hundredths of a cent. It's not even 1% of your utility bill. There are a lot of things driving your energy cost, but it's not the SBC charge. But and I'm glad to give you some more information on that, Michael. I can break that down on a separate spreadsheet and do a comparison of community benefit versus those charge or those incentives.
Thank you, sir.
Slide 8. So we talked about the real property tax law, personal property. Just last thing I'm going to mention, which is really important to the assessment, and we'll talk about depreciation a little bit later. Equipment degradation. So each year the solar array will produce just a little less power. It'll generate a little less revenue, and we'll depreciate the system over a 25-year period. Kind of on a straight line basis. We have to remove the system in 25 years. We have a bond with the town, or we'll have a bond to do decommissioning of the system in 25 years. And so when we talk about depreciation later, that's the basis for our depreciation. We have to remove it in 25 years, and it will produce less power every year between now and year 25 when we have to remove it. Are there any further questions on assessment considerations? Great.
Excuse me, Mike.
Go ahead.
Just for people's, I can't see all the screen, so if you got a question, either send a chat or just speak up.
Great. So I've moved on to slide 9. This is our first slide that talks about individual project economics. Eric Millard from CS Energy is on the line, and I'm going to hand this over to Eric so he can talk about his project economics. And I will pick back up after his project and go through the community solar economics on the slides behind us. Eric, can you hear me? And if you can, you want to pick up the mic here.
Another communication problem.
He's muted. Did he mute himself, or
I
did
can see him talking, but his microphone is muted.
Eric,
you're muted, buddy.
you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
There we
I
go.
can hear you now, yep.
Hello?
Yep.
All right,
that's-
there we go. Sorry. We're all having some technical difficulties today. So thank you, Mike, and thank you, Chairman O'Brien and the rest of the IDA here. Appreciate you guys all taking the opportunity to let us present this and talk to you more about what we're trying to do here with these solar projects. So when Mike and I were sort of preparing for this presentation, you know, we wanted to convey all of the important kind of high-level information that Mike just went through in the first 8 slides, but we thought it would also be helpful to kind of zero in on projects, on specific projects, so you can get a sense for what each of these individual projects look like. So we decided to look at one large-scale project, which is the type of project that CS Energy develops. And then Michael pick the mic back up in a couple of slides and go through a community solar project, which is a little bit smaller project. Those are the two different types of projects that we've been talking to you guys about over the last couple of months. So this project that we're talking about here on slide 9 is called Darby Solar. It's a 20 megawatt project located in the town of Easton. We've been developing this project for about 3.5 years. We've been working closely with the town throughout that time period. The projects are located kind of right on the south end of town, close to the Rensselaer County border. We received our planning board approvals towards the end of 2019 for these projects, and so the town town planning board has approved them. The town is supportive of the projects. We have been working, this year since we got those approvals on a variety of other kind of final approvals related to, wetlands and interconnection. Those are all getting wrapped up as we speak. We have our financing solution finalized at this point, and we intend to start construction of this project by the end of this year. It needs to be turned on and operational by the end of 2021 to comply with the contract that we have with NYSERDA. So we're getting kind of into the last phases of development before we transition into the construction phase of the project. One of the last things that we need to finalize in order to satisfy the final conditions of our financing agreements is to finalize this pilot. So this is really important and critical piece of the project development process for us and why we're here today. So we wanted to just kind of show you some summary data points here. And so, we do have spreadsheets that Mike mentioned that to back all of this stuff up, so we can share that with you guys and kind of walk through spreadsheets in more detail. But in forums like this, we find it's more productive to kind of show, not like walk through a 20 or 30 or 40 line spreadsheet with people. We find it to be more productive to show the summary numbers. And then if folks want to do a deep dive offline, we're happy to do that as well. So we wanted to, I guess, look at two things. So one is looking at the actual economics of the project. So as Mike indicated, these projects require a very substantial upfront investment. So for our projects, it costs about each project costs about $30 million to build. That's the all-in construction costs to get these projects installed. You can see here that we've given you a summary of the revenue, operating expenses, and our cost of capital expenses over the 25-year life of the system. So the revenue is fairly straightforward. We're selling energy every year. We're selling power to NYSERDA under contract for 20 years. That's a very kind of fixed revenue stream. We know exactly how much energy the system is going to be generating because of weather, pretty extensive weather studies we've done to understand how much sunlight there is and how much power the system is going to produce every year. We know exactly how much we're going to be selling our electricity, our power to the state for, because we have a contract, long-term contract that supports that. The operating expenses are those expenses required to operate the system. So that will include our payments to our landowners. It includes preventative and emergency maintenance that needs to happen. It includes mowing the lawn, insurance. It includes other operational expenses that are required to connect us to the grid and interface with the electricity markets. Those operating expenses also include the proposed pilot payment that we're proposing to the town or to the IDA of $50,000 per year, and it escalating at 2%, and it also includes special district taxes as well. The third line item is our debt service cost of capital line item. So obviously, like, money is not free. A big component of our expenses every year goes towards paying our investors. So these projects are long-term, relatively low risk, generating facilities. As I mentioned, like, you know, the sun comes up every day. We have a good sense of how much electricity this thing's going to produce every year. We have a fixed price contract. So we bring in investors who are seeking a modest rate of return, you know, in kind of the mid to high single digits percentage wise. And they need to be paid back the, you know, the interest and principal on that investment that they're making with us. So that
Eric,
debt service cost capital line represents that.
Eric?
I'm sorry, is there a question?
It's more a statement. We have some people have hard stops and have to leave. So if we lose the people, we won't have a quorum. So we'll have to discontinue the meeting. So can we sort of pick up the pace a little bit, please? I'd appreciate it. I don't mean to be rude.
Sure. What? No, not at all. When's the hard stop?
We have a hard stop at 10:30, but we have a lot of other business we have to cover also.
Got it.
Okay.
So bottom line here on this
Tom,
slide is that we're showing you.
We have one question here.
Eric and Mike, this is an elementary question.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question.
No.
The question was, is this current 2020 dollars brought back to? The answer was from Mike was no.
Well,
go ahead, Eric.
just looking at nominal dollars, yeah. So you can see, bottom line here is you can see how much money, what the profit is that we're making on these projects. And then the table below is showing what we are proposing in terms of our proposed pilot payment over 25 years, which is $1.6 million per project on these large scale projects. And then it's also showing different scenarios for what the project would be paying under different assessment methodologies. So row 2 shows what NYSERDA's recommendation is, and rows 3 through 5 are showing what we would be paying if we were assessed at different assessment methodologies. So we have a low assessment of $500,000 and a high assessment of $4 million. And that shows what we would be paying if we were on the tax rolls being assessed at those numbers. And those assessed values are based in fact. We hired a third-party independent assessment consultant who does assessments and valuations on energy projects as their core business. And we're happy to share that report with you. The bottom line here is that what we're proposing to you is both fair and in line with what profit we're making on these projects. And number 2 is a better deal for the IDA and the community, the taxing jurisdictions than it would be if we were just paying taxes on the tax roll. And the reason we're willing to pay more for the pilot situation is that it gives us certainty. We have we know what our pilot payments are going to be. There's no risk of Article 7, and we kind of agree on what's fair up front and don't have to worry about it in the future. And I'd say the last thing before I pass it along, pass the mic back over to Mike, is that these pilot payments are actually in line and better than other pilots that have been approved previously. So there's a project that was approved by the Mechanicville-Stillwater IDA just across the river at about 50% less pilot payments than what we're proposing. We have 2 projects that we are developing outside of Ithaca that are where the pilot payments are about 20% less than what we're proposing here. So I just want to drive the point home that, like, this is a very good deal. It's fair for us. It's a very good deal for the IDA, and it's in line and better than what the taxing jurisdictions would get if they just assessed us under normal assessment methodologies. So this next slide, I don't want to go into detail, but this kind of just gives you one level down on the different scenarios that I just described based on what we're proposing for pilots and then what we would be paying under different assessment methodologies. So I don't think it's worth talking about in detail here, but I would just say, like, if people have additional questions and they want to kind of go through any of the stuff that I just talked about in detail, I'd be more than happy to get on a shared screen offline with a spreadsheet and kind of walk you through the numbers and get you guys comfortable with it. We're happy to do that anytime. So please, I'd be happy to have you guys take me up on that offer. So I'll pass it back on to Mike to talk about his community solar project.
Thanks, Eric. I'm going to move you to slide 11. So different from Eric, community solar systems get a little more revenue. Our revenue is not contracted with the state of New York. We have to sell that We have to sell that through solar credits to individual subscribers. Hopefully, those subscribers, we'd like to work with the IDA and the towns to make sure those subscribers come from Washington, Warren County, so the money stays here. But we sell those solar credits that develops a sales revenue. So for a typical 5 megawatt community solar system, we'll generate $17 million over the next 25 years. Our operations expense to do that will cost roughly $9.8 million, and our gross revenue is roughly $7 million. So if you take out principal and interest, you essentially have a payment of $5.8 million, which leaves you with a net operating income of $2 million over 25 years. And so just kind of note, on a community solar system, keep in mind that the people that we sell power to, we have to base all of our sales on a credit score. And so there's more uncertainty in the revenue stream. Eric's revenue streams are considered investment grade. We are doing a retail revenue sales generation mechanism, which is not investment grade. So our investors require higher returns. Very specifically, we need a 7% pre-tax IRR. These numbers and the pilot numbers that we're proposing allow us to get to a 7% IRR. And then I listed some of the other assumptions, but that'll give you a picture of where we're at. This isn't a huge moneymaker. There aren't millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars at stake. These margins are very tight. We have to operate a really tight ship, and this is what we have to work with. So when we talk about, you got a question, Jack?
Yeah, where do the federal solar tax credits figure in?
So I mentioned, let's see.
So,
go ahead.
No, go ahead. Answer his question.
So the tax credits, you basically take the construction costs, a bunch of development costs, you add that up, and you get a right now it's like a 26% tax credit on that. Yeah.
So do you sell those to a bank, or are you going to use those actually?
So as I stated in a previous presentation, for the most part, banks own these projects. It's like your house. The bank, you own the house, but your bank really owns the house. You're going to pay them until you pay it off. Same thing. Bank takes the tax credit, and the bank will provide the debt to finance these systems. They're one of multiple companies that will work together to finance these systems.
So I have a comment on the chat. Dana, did you want to ask your question, or? Dana Hogan?
Yeah, so I mean, I wrote it out. You want me to read it to you? I can read it, so bear with me.
Well, some people don't have the chat capability there, Dana.
Okay, so one of the comments I heard earlier, Mike, was that the assessments are the crux of the issue related to whether solar arrays can move forward. And my understanding is that if a local community chooses to remain opted in, they may negotiate pilots and provide a certainty related to the valuations. And I think you know this because you requested our law recently, like in the last week or two. Was that correct?
I have your law. I've looked at your law pretty extensively.
Okay, so we developed that law with NYSERDA, and it provides certainty, which is what you keep saying that you need for a 15, and ours was a 15-year pilot arrangement. And the valuation is based on kilowatts produced, not our assessor. And this is why it seems like I feel like there's some bad information being provided. You keep suggesting that the assessor is going to determine it. That's not the way our law reads. Am I correct?
The assessment isn't in the assessment, as I understand it, in the law that I've read, does not provide an assessment for the system. It does provide a framework for a pilot amount.
Based on kilowatts produced, correct?
What's that?
I thought
not kilowatts produced, it's based on megawatts. It's the capacity of the system.
Yep. So the local communities every community in Washington County and Warren County has the option to do this. You can opt in like Kingsbury's done. We're one of the few communities that remain opted in. And so we provide tax certainty. So I guess I was just curious, and again, I don't know if this was the right timing for that question, so I apologize if I've interrupted a train of thought here. But if the communities aren't opting back in, then it would clear that they don't want those host benefit community packages that are being offered. That's what I feel like. There's already there's a mechanism in place to go forward in this process.
If you take Kingsbury, Dana, if you don't mind me using you as an example, Kingsbury has a pilot agreement for the town portion of the taxes. There's no pilot agreement for the school or for the county. So you're right that they have the option to opt in to do that. So the assessor still needs to provide an assessment. If we went down that road and we get a pilot with the town, the assessor still needs to provide an assessment for both the school and the county, regardless of what they do. And that the school represents about 75% of all taxes, all property taxes. So that alone, although the pilot's great with the town, not having an assessment and knowing my taxes for the school, that's a big hurdle, especially because it's 75% of the burden. So when I talk about an assessment, I still need an assessment to understand my tax liability for both for the county and the
So where I was going with that, Mike, is that there is a mechanism in place for the school to change that option if they choose to do so. Currently, right now, based on my last conversation with representatives of the Hudson Falls School District, they don't want to change that option. So the school board has the final answer. They answer to the taxpayers. And if the school board doesn't want to make that change at this time, then we've got the message from the school district as well as the county. Would you agree?
I did not have that conversation, Dana. It's would be great to let them know what the value of a host agreement would do for them, so they could bring in a bunch of revenue that they're not going to get from the state next year and avoid the tax cap.
So
I'd like to have that conversation with them.
Conversation with Kevin Palunzi yourself?
I've spoken to Kevin. Kevin wanted to get through the budget before he had a conversation about community host agreements and opting back in.
Well, again, that's why I keep going to. I feel like and I've said this before, I think the idea is, even the idea of researching a countywide pilot without more input from the school districts. I don't believe the school district personnel were invited to this meeting. I didn't see them on the list of invitees. I would have liked to have seen them on there. I think what I've asked before is that you reach out to the county first as a full board, not just a handful of individuals, and let the counties have a full discussion about it. Let the school districts have a full discussion about it, rather than just an IDA discussion about a countywide pilot.
So Dana, on that note, and this is kind of what I've been talking about. Try to it'd be great. Open policy, open talks. I'm all about that. That's why we're here. We want to do that. They do have an option to opt back in. They can do pilots. That's absolutely true. At the end of the day, the IDA is a board that allows add some efficiency to the process and can work for the best interest of the school district and the town and the county. Now, what happens if that doesn't take place is that the assessment gets awry. Full assessment's not going to work. There's not enough money in the economics for that, and then you're faced with an Article 7. What we're proposing is more money than you'll get from the outcome of an Article 7.
Well, Mike, just to comment, though, you referred to efficiency. I think it's efficiency for you, and I understand that. But what you're doing is kind of taking away the decision from the decision makers related to a school board as well as the county board. We haven't had the opportunity to discuss this as a full board. And what troubles me is that it feels like it's being circumvented by utilizing the IDA to do this. It's just a troubling feeling I have, that I don't feel like this is being done in an appropriate manner. I think it should be the discussion should be had with school boards and county boards at this point.
I think that one thing that he pointed to earlier was that they're not looking for a 15-year pilot and looking for a 20 or 25-year pilot, which the towns or the school boards don't have the capability to look at.
So Dave, on that note,
is that right, Mike?
Would anything above 10 years be considered an enhanced abatement?
Yes, it would.
So that would require local municipality approval, correct?
Correct.
Then why wouldn't you have the discussion at the local level before you try to go ahead with that approach?
I have no opposition to that.
Okay. Well,
I
good.
didn't realize the presentation was gonna be this big. I thought he was gonna answer the question that the board had come up with, what the numbers were, because that was crucial to you and to everyone else.
Well, it was, and I appreciate it finally coming after, it's been quite a while. It's been over a month, and we just got it about an hour ago. So I want to make sure we all have the opportunity to vet these numbers accurately. And Mike, I would love the opportunity to sit down with you personally and go through these numbers myself, specific to the Kingsbury project. I would hope you wouldn't take any action on this any time in the near future. David, I've said that. I think you need to, this thing has a long tail on it. You should be looking very closely at this over the next few months. This isn't a matter of weeks kind of decision.
I agree with you, Dana.
Thank you.
I accept that invite, Dana. Glad to sit down with you.
Okay, go ahead, Mike. And we are getting short, so.
Yeah, it's 10 minutes. Okay. So I'm going to move you, just in the interest of time here. I've said a lot of these options, or a lot of these statements already. Slide 12. I did worst case scenario. Worst case is you throw out personal property. It's full assessment based on construction cost. That would require $2.28 million of tax revenue over 25 years. If you subtract that from my net operating income for 25 years, that leaves me with a net profit of $381,000 over 25 years. I can't get that financed. There's no profit for the financiers, none. And so that essentially stops me right there. I've talked about Article 7. We don't want to go down that route. I'm just trying to explain to you that where we come up with the numbers, why we talk about Article 7, because if we can't get to a number that fits within that net operating income with a 7% IRR, these things don't get built or they go to court, one or the other. If it goes to court, and we lose, you lose the revenue. We're not going to build them anyway. So we're coming kind of full circle here. So glad to sit down with anybody and go through these numbers. There's nothing we're hiding. It's very straightforward. And like to come up with a pathway that works for everybody.
This one?
Slide 13. I'm not going to go through this. Eric had the same slide.
I think we're doing after lunch.
Today? Nice. That's cool.
We can't swim, but we can do that.
It's got water?
Yeah, there'll be water.
Hey, Don. Don, could you mute yourself, please? Thank you.
So
Dave, I got a question when we're stopped for a second.
Go ahead, Brian.
When you were just talking about, when you were talking about Article 7, you said that if you lost in court, you wouldn't build them anyway. Well, you wouldn't be in court unless you already built it. So I'm a little confused at that.
Brian, that's absolutely true. So if we lost in court, we take all our personal property, decommission it, and go and leave because you couldn't afford to stay. That's absolutely right.
Okay, so that's a little different story than I just heard. Okay.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm kind of genericizing here.
Genericizing, that's a new word.
You like that word?
The reference is Article 78.
Oh, 78.
I thought it was.
So slide 13, I laid out all the taxing options, construction cost assessment, a pilot with special district taxes based on a construction cost estimate, a discounted cash flow model. I also put in here NYSERDA recommendations and special districts. You can see the cash flow over the years. The numbers kind of speak for themselves. The values will depreciate with the exception of the pilot. The pilot's going to increase every year based on a 2% escalator. The pilot's going to increase every year for 2%. On every other model, it's going to decrease based on depreciating the asset. So your revenues go down over time, over that 25 years. And you have 5 options that compare everything. Option number 5, full assessment based on a $7.8 million assessment. The numbers are in red because 1, there's no profit for the investor, and 2, there's not enough money to make it's not gonna get financed. So I put those numbers in red just to highlight the sensitivity of a full assessment. Kind of in the interest of time, I just want to talk about a community host agreement or a host community agreement. Host community agreements, it's not clear whether we can do that within the IDA, but we could do that with individual towns. The value of a host community agreement is that it doesn't count against your tax cap. You can use it for capital expenses, workforce programs, buying equipment, scholarships, whatever you need to use that money for, but it doesn't count against the tax cap. We can make that an annual agreement. You could get a host community payment every year for the next 25 years, as opposed to a pilot payment, which would only provide tax relief for your taxpayers. Last, again, in the interest of time, the last thing I want to leave you with, the benefits of pilot over 25 versus 15. The 25 years is gonna give you higher revenues. If you look at my chart that I gave you on slide 13, you'll notice, you'll see that if you stop the you stop the pilot agreement at year 15, you're gonna lose 10 years of 2% escalation, and your asset's gonna be depreciated at year 15. So if you pick up a full assessment at year 15, you're not picking up at full value like it was on year 1. You depreciated that asset for 15 years. So you're starting from a different place in year 15.
So just a question on the host community benefit.
Yep.
Does the host community benefit actually shift the money from pilot to the local community? And what's the mechanism to make sure it's shared equally between county, village, and school, or county, town, and school and village?
We have to answer the question whether the IDA can do that. We could do a pilot with a smaller pilot with the IDA to cover the tax aspect of it, and do a host community agreement with each individual municipality in parallel. So we wouldn't have to do that through the IDA.
Right, but you're reducing the pilot to cover the host benefit. So,
yep.
And when you do that, are you discounting the host community benefit over the 25 years? Because you can do it either up front, you can do it at 5 years, or you can do it annually. But the cost of that money is spread over 25 years, isn't it?
It depends how you structure the host agreement. So you're not necessarily discounting the amount of money that you're going to get. If you did an annual host community agreement and did a payment every year, the money would be essentially generated during that year or the year before to give you that money. So there's no discount to that. But if you want it all up front,
there's a discount.
Then we have to factor in financing for that money.
So if you do a $100,000 host community benefit, you are discounting the long term by whatever the factor is over 25 years, which may take another $40,000, $50,000 out of your pilot payments.
I could come up with a scenario to kind of give you actual numbers, but yeah.
So you're reducing the amount of pilot to cover the cost of the payments over 25 years.
Yes.
So in my term, I don't like to give up money for a long term, because I might need it down the road as much as I need it today, or even more.
That's
So
a consideration.
we're discounting money in there. Okay, thank you.
If there's no more questions on slide 14, I'm going to bring you to slide 15. I just did some research. I wanted to do a comparison, brick and mortar versus a solar array, and I certainly I took some of this off the IDA website, did some calculations of my own. So certainly I would welcome the opportunity to do an actual business plan versus business plan comparison. But based on what I pulled off the website, it looked like roughly Market 32 would get roughly $1 million exemption. 15 years in employment. It looked like there were 80 employees, 18 or 15 of which were managerial. You know, you got a $32 million employment package over 15 years. The pilot payments or the tax payments over 15 years was $575,000. You know, you can scroll down here. The total community benefit was roughly $33 million from Market 32. There's some infrastructure requirements for that. I put a nominal fee in there, but the dollar exempted versus the community benefit is 30 to 1, basically $30 for every dollar exempted. On the community solar system, assuming we can reach a common assessment and I'm not actually asking for an abatement, I put $10 in there as an, because I needed something for the formula to work. But you know, the benefit of solar over the same period is $1.7 million to a dollar of exempted. So, you know, glad to kind of flesh this out. But I think from a brick and mortar versus solar pilot, there's a lot of upside to doing a solar pilot. We don't require schools. We don't require infrastructure. We're going to save your residents money, both on taxes. They're going to get lease income, and they're going to save money on your utility bills. So there's a huge benefit for the community doing a solar pilot.
So I did have a question here. You stated that host community benefit avoids the tax cap. Could you explain that better, please?
That's a tough question. So when we do a pilot, that's not within a town. It costs a certain amount of money to run a town. That pilot, when that pilot goes into the fund, that the pilot money comes off the amount of money that the town has to tax the residents. The residents get tax relief. In reference to the tax cap, you can't go over the 2%. And I don't know this law intimately, but essentially you can't go over the 2%. The comptroller actually tells you exactly what that is. But essentially it will provide tax relief to the residents of that town or county.
So can I explain a little different?
Yeah, please.
So when you calculate your tax levy, the pilot payments go into calculating the tax levy. So if you take a host community benefit, let's say it's $100,000, that is not included in the calculation. And Laura, correct me if I get too far off. The $100,000 would not be calculated in your tax levy, so you have more room in your tax cap, so you don't go over the tax cap. The $100,000 is money. But as Laura pointed out to me, is that if the state sees that as a revenue source they're missing for the tax cap, is they could change that at any time. Is that correct, Laura?
To my understanding, yes, it is.
Okay, so while up front, the host benefit package may be attractive, if they change it, it may not be attractive. It may not change your tax levy. Or it would impact your tax levy, I'm sorry. Okay. Other questions, can you please explain further the math behind your 15-year employment revenue?
I had a salary for managers at like $60,000 and hourly wage. There are 80 employees in total, so it was $15 for the clerks and all the support people outside of the 18 managers.
Any other questions for Mike?
Colleen Adamak, may I make a comment on the Cornell mention for the record?
Yes.
Okay, Cornell University is a land grant for New York State, and under Real Property Tax Law 487, it is number 10 now. It is permanently exempt, and that was added to the law, I would say, last year. I just wanted to go on record with that. Thank you.
And who was that speaking, please? Colleen, okay, thank you.
Colleen Adamack, Assessor, Kingsbury and Greenwich.
Thanks, Colleen.
You're welcome.
Okay, quick follow-up.
Someone else have a question?
I had one, Dave.
Okay, Dana.
So, Mike, I saw you provide a comparison between Market 32 and the sites that you're in question. You know, it is important to distinguish the fact that Market 32 was on a brownfield site, if I recall correctly. And that it was signed or made into law back in the first quarter of 2020. I thought, my understanding was the prioritization of those projects was brownfield sites and abandoned sites. Am I correct in saying that?
Priority of what projects? The Market 32 project?
No, the solar. So part of that Accelerated Renewable Growth Act, the priority of those projects and those to be applied, which is what I thought when we had the first discussion on June 29th was what prompted a lot of this initial discussion, is that the changes that have occurred. But that act, my understanding was it's prioritizing those kind of projects in brownfield, landfills, and abandoned sites. The sites that you're identifying here aren't any of those, if I understood this correctly.
The act doesn't prioritize the brownfield sites over regular sites. There's the act talks about the overall goal of 6 gigawatts of solar. It does incentivize brownfield development, landfills specifically.
I think it specifically uses the phrase prioritizes in the press release that was issued by Governor Cuomo's office.
Dana, I can perhaps answer that. So the prioritization of brownfields comes from NYSERDA and their site location program. They're basically charged with identifying brownfields to get them shovel ready for solar development. They're one of the 3 or 4 agencies that comprise agencies that are putting the act together, but the actual brownfield piece of it is NYSERDA's charge for their prioritization for site location for development.
Okay, so they must have been issued in the press release. Was it a joint press release back in April?
It probably was, because again, there's NYSERDA, there's ORIS, the Office of Site Location, there's like 4 state agencies involved.
Okay, thanks, Laura.
Any other questions?
Dave?
Yeah.
Dave?
Yes, Brian.
Brian Campbell. So the Gear Road Solar, you got 15-year employment there of a third of what Market 32 is. Who's employed there after you construct it?
As you know, Brian, there's nobody employed at the solar system after it's constructed. There's a team of people that will work to manage the system, including subscription management, operations, performance, and landscaping, but nobody works on the site.
Okay. And you're going to pay them nearly $1 million a year over 15 years. Well, it's not quite $1 million, but it's 800,000 or close to it. No, it just doesn't, that number just doesn't make sense to me. And if that one doesn't, should any of the rest of them? I guess that's where
The number doesn't make sense to you, Brian? The construction revenue? It's construction and operation.
The 11 million.
It's construction and operation revenue. I can break that down for you.
So the construction
that's just employment. That's just employment according to what it says.
Yep.
Right, but he's including temporary employment through the construction phase.
It's still just employment.
Correct.
That's nearly $800,000 a year.
No, Brian, it's all, most of it's up front.
Year one.
Doesn't matter. He's got the 15 years written there. The average would be 800,000. All right. That doesn't make sense to me.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Terminology should have been better. Anything else? Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it. I think this begs an issue. We've had a few conversations about this. There's one important conversation that I think we have to have, whether you do it today or we have it at our next board meeting, full board meeting for the IDA. is this, we already have a policy in place that we do not entertain solar pilots. The question is that are we ready, or do we want to change that policy and move forward solar policy, developing a solar policy? I think that's a question we have to ask. And Mr. Biddle, I'd like to recognize you.
Chairman, thank you so much. Thank you, Eric and Mike, for the presentation. I'm not prepared to have that discussion right now, Chairman, because I need to digest these numbers. I've got other questions that I want to prepare. This is a wonderful next step, but it's as most presentations do, it presents more questions. So I am not prepared as a member of the executive committee and the board to vote or consider changes to our solar policy at this time.
Other input?
Dave.
Go ahead.
So just listening to the total discussion, there's a few problems I have. Number one is if government wasn't totally involved in this isn't even a viable business, which scares me that the IDA is involved with anything that would never be viable without government, because you've got the NYSERDA piece, you've got the pilot piece. This scares me a little on that front. Second of all, you can't borrow yourself rich. You can't just keep putting money out as a government and expect everything's going to get better. It doesn't work. We've tried it. We're trying it again now at the federal and state level, and we can see where that's going. And the last thing, as a business owner, you can sell your soul to make money, but as a public servant, I can't sell the soul of the constituents that I represent for anyone to make money. And so I have a complete problem with some of this. So I got down to 3 questions that are totally unrelated to what they presented today, because if you follow the numbers, there's opportunities there. But my question is this: why would we ever entertain a 25-year pilot for jobs that are all done at construction, and none of those continue later on, when we don't even do that for viable manufacturing businesses, which is what we're supposed to really be looking at? Second of all, why would we ever put farmland at risk in an agricultural county for something that isn't going to help agriculture from any point that I could see? And the last one, after all that, I can't even remember. I'm just blown away with the whole discussion at this point, and I just can't get there. But I'm willing to listen and take it. I don't think I could ever vote for any of this. That's where I'm at, and I have, like Mike Biddle said, he's right. I've come away with a hell of a lot more questions than answers, and I just can't get there. I think when it comes right down to it, local rules where this belongs, and that's what I would vote for. In fact, my overview of the IDA is this: we provide tools to help our town, villages, schools, county, and make the things happen that they want to happen. Never should we be in a position where we make things happen that they don't want to make happen. And that's where I'm at today, and will probably always be at on that issue. So that's my piece.
Any other comments? Yeah, I believe I'm on record to say that I don't want to do anything that's going to be opposed to the direction the towns want to take, and I think that they need to be part of the discussion in terms of even ongoing that if in fact that there is a solar pilot put in place, I certainly want to have them have some sort of approval process in before even accepting an application, so we know they're on board with what's going on. So any other comments? All right, we need to move on. Hopefully we'll need.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Appreciate your
Mike.
time.
Thanks. Park, Nolan Propane, we need to talk about Nolan Propane. So, did you get that? Nolan Propane, Kara, do you want to lead that discussion? We got
Yeah.
response from the attorney. It feels good. You're not in the hot seat.
Oh, my. Okay, so last meeting, we received, or at the full board meeting, we received the presentation. We got a letter, Tuesday, I guess, from the attorney regarding the changes that they would like to have incorporated into the contract. Some of them are just standard changes that they would like to have. But the one there's two that I believe affect the IDA with respect to this. One is that the draft contract indicates that they'll get 60 days for their municipal approval after the contract. And then, the attorney is saying that they've done several of these projects. The prior two projects that they've done have taken 10 to 14 months to get approvals. So what they would be looking for is to have that opportunity, at least that time frame, to go and get their approvals and then close within the 60 days after they receive their approvals. So the one question is the board willing to wait that time frame while they get their approvals? The other item that they had a question with or a comment on is the right of reversion that you've historically included in the contract, where you would say that if the project isn't commenced or completed within a certain time frame, then the IDA has the right, not obligation, but has the right to take the property back and then try to sell it to another property owner that would develop it. They would like to have that removed from the deed, but they would agree to that contractually. So you would technically have a breach of contract action if they didn't fulfill that obligation. I'm not sure really what the impact, why they wouldn't allow it in the deed if they're willing to agree to it contractually, except for that it's a bigger headache on your end to try to get the property back if they only agree to it contractually. And then the last thing is the attorney is asking me to provide them with what the pilot arrangement is that's agreed to. I know that there were some discussions that this developer would also apply for benefits for the project, but they haven't done that yet. To me, it makes more sense for them to kind of do everything simultaneously so they know if they're going to get approved for a benefit package and what that benefit package looks like. I mean, I can get back to him right now and say, well, he hasn't applied. There have been no discussions as to that approval process, but those are the items. The other items in the letter, I can, certainly address with the seller's attorney or the buyer's attorney. I'm sorry, they're just kind of standard. Obviously, we'll provide the delineation maps when we get those. The others were kind of.
So the Article 14, they're asking to amend that to 60 days after the site plan approval?
Yeah, which they would like to have extended out at least to, well, he isn't asking for anything, but he's telling us the last two times they had a similar project approved, it took 10 months in one municipality and 14 months in another municipality. So they would be asking for presumably a year in order to get those approvals, which, I mean,
so
I've never had to try, I've never represented anyone to cite this type of project.
So would we also include in there that some language is that, I don't want to say time of the essence, but get my drift, is that they just can't wait and do it at their own pace?
They need to apply and.
Need to apply to
Yeah.
a certain point in the period to make sure that all the timeframes are being met to get in there,
To keep on track.
keep on track. So does anyone else have a problem with it, adding that type of language to the contract? We'll have to approve this contract at the board meeting anyway, so. Anyone else have any objections? So Carol draft up the language.
Chairman,
Yes, Mike.
just to be clear, I think what you said, but I don't want to make it up. Just to be clear, we can put language in there saying that the buyer has to move forward at X amount of dates. Like, I don't want them submitting stuff on the 11th month because they're asking for a year extension.
Right.
Kara?
We would say that they need to, reach out initially within 30, 45, 60 days initially to get on the agenda. They must get on an agenda no later than, and we can work with them to make sure they get on the agenda, and then they work diligently to remain on track there.
Great.
Okay.
Proposed schedule. Comment was they should submit a proposed schedule. Everyone's all right with that? Lot 3, correct. And then what about the right of reversion?
Chairman?
Yes, Mike.
Kara, you said you'd never run into that before, right?
Well, no one has ever really complained about it because everybody always presumes they're going to do their project. It's a protection for the IDA because when back initially, the IDA didn't want to sell lots on speculation and then just have somebody else holding them for some potential future development. They wanted to be sure the project was completed.
Many of them did in phase 1.
Right.
They spec'd
Say what?
They held them, phase 1, they bought them and held them.
The comment was, when we did phase 1, there were companies that bought properties on speculation, but they bought multiple properties, multiple lots, didn't they? So now we should change this, but we're only talking about one lot right now and not multiple lots, which the speculation was the problem before, so.
They'll agree to the language contractually. They don't want to put it in the deed. So if they fail to complete the construction in a certain time frame, then the IDA would have a breach of contract action against them and would go after them that way.
Kara, does
Yeah.
it weaken our position at all?
Yeah.
Through the,
Yeah, because it just makes it more of a headache for you because it's not in the deed, which would prohibit them from really doing anything with the property until you issue a certificate that the project's been completed, or you issue a certificate saying that you're releasing them from that obligation. The other thing that it does is it does set some precedent to any other lots because that
Correct.
language has always been required.
And we've never had anybody else ask us for that, correct?
We've never, to my knowledge, we've never agreed to not include it. I don't really know if anybody else has asked for that not to be included, but we've always included it. We've utilized it once where we took a lot back.
Would
To my
you,
knowledge.
could I submit to the board that, we don't always have to take what people want. Could we submit to Kara to go back to them and say this is normal procedure for us and that there shouldn't be a problem if they adhere to construction, all that stuff. But I'm worried about the precedent that it also sets.
Well, what we're saying, if they don't do their project and they leave it barren, would it be would there be a way, Kara, to add in there that they could, if they're not meeting their schedule for some reason, they could go back for an extension or an amendment to that to extend the time frame?
Sure, yeah. They could come back and say, we're not completed and these are the reasons why. And, you could grant that extension. And it's not a mandatory obligation for the IDA to take the property back. It's just a right that you have should you choose to do that if the project doesn't move forward.
I'm just saying that, could we amend that to say that some language in there that says if they can't meet their schedule for specific reasons, they can extend that? or apply for an extension or
Sure.
however, as long as we see they are making progress, not that they're just sitting there doing nothing.
I like that.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, what do we have to vote on? I'm going to have to go, and I know that this will break our quorum here.
No, I think we're all set. Nothing on there.
Brian, stop laughing.
Oh, hold on a second. Let's get into this. We need the approval of the July 8th, 2020 minutes for the executive park. Need a motion for that?
I'll move.
By Mike, second by Brian Campbell. All in favor?
Aye.
Brian, you got a question? Okay, I guess Brian. Okay. That was it. Recapture updates.
Okay.
We're really wrapping up quickly here.
Okay, I have.
Oh, moving the board meeting. We have a problem with scheduling the board meeting. For the 17th, Kara can't make it. We're gonna need her there. I'd like a motion to move that meeting till the 18th.
So moved.
Moved by Brian Campbell. Do I have a second? I have a second. I'm moving. To the 18th. Michael Biddle seconds it. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Recapture updates.
Fire Tech is done. Patty Company, Morris Products, we're just still waiting on their transmittal to Tax and Finance. That was supposed to go out this week. LG Plaza got back to us. They've submitted amended ST340s. They've provided copies to us. We're waiting on the transmittal to Tax and Finance. They amended theirs. They went back, they looked at everything. They determined that they took an exemption on part of the building construction with that Price Chopper built. But Price Chopper was entitled to those exemptions, not them. Price Chopper built the building and then LG Plaza purchased it from them. So that we're waiting on their submittal to Tax and Finance. So that should be resolved too.
Okay. So recapture's all set. Dewatering road purchase update. We are going back to the subdivision board. We hope to be back next Wednesday to get the subdivision completed. They're going back and forth about what they want from us, so I think we've got it straightened out. So
yeah, I've got this. We'll see how that goes. Okay.
we'll get there. So, okay. New business, I didn't have any. Adjourn the IDA Executive Park meeting. Any other business come before the Executive Board? The adjournment of IDA Executive Park meeting. We have a quorum, so it's adjourned anyways. We'll have to defer the CDC approval of meetings to the next meeting, since we're not there. I don't have anything else. Anyone have anything else?
No, it's business I've heard yet.
What? Bye, thank you.
There's nothing else.
Goodbye, thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, Dave.